It's Pete Hammond. Petehammond. Columnist for Deadline Hollywood.
And what is Deadline Hollywood?
Deadline Hollywood is Nikki Fink, her site, which is it's become the #1 Hollywood industry trade site. Challenged Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, all of them in terms of being where the industry turns for news. Yeah, it's very big deal. Yeah, I'm a columnist there. I cover award seasons, the Oscars, all of that, as well as movies. And I also am a film critic for Box Office Magazine and Leonard Maltin's Movie Guide.
Did you have much say in the selection of the films for this festival?
I had no say. No, I have to. I'm just going to talk to you, right? Okay. No, I had absolutely no say in it. I was just asked to host tonight's opening, which I do a lot of screening series and Q&As like this, and so Marvin Page, who put together a lot of the celebrity turnout tonight, has seen me do this over and over and over, and I guess told the organizers here about that, and so they called and asked me to do it, and I was happy to do it because, quite frankly, even though it's been going on for 7 years, I really wasn't aware of this festival. There's the Israeli Film Festival, which I'm very aware of, but it's Israeli films, and I've shown a lot of those in my screening series. But I was not aware there was the Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival, and I think it's a great idea because there's a separation between films that come out of Israel and films that are of interest to Jewish audiences in particular that celebrate that in a film festival format. And so I thought, wow, that's great. That's different.
Do you consider yourself a Hollywood historian?
Yeah, I do. I'm very versed in the history of motion pictures in Hollywood. Yeah.
And there have been books about the history of the Jews in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But would you say that that the Jews are promoting a Jewish agenda in cinema?
Well, I think it depends on what era of Hollywood you're talking about in terms of promoting a Jewish agenda. I think in the beginning of Hollywood, with all the moguls, I think they ran away from it. I think they were ashamed of their own religion and heritage, quite frankly. And I don't think you saw the truth portrayed in a lot of instances. And I think a lot of the films that were produced that dealt with Jewish issues are issues of interest to Jews, were kind of watered down and not really true to what they should have been, which is shocking considering the level of the studio heads, where they came from, and their Jewish heritage. But I think they were out to sell straight entertainment then, and they were building a different kind of industry, not an industry that they necessarily were going to promote their own religious beliefs.
But even today, is there a Jewish agenda, do you think, in Hollywood?
You've heard this over and over that there may be a Jewish agenda. I don't think there is, but I do think there are producers that are very, very interested in making sure people don't forget, and that one of them, Steven Spielberg's key in this, in doing that, and I think Schindler's List was a turning point in that, because Steven Spielberg is very serious about promoting the Jewish agenda, making sure that people don't forget, certain things that went on, and in the case of Schindler's List, obviously, but also in the case of this amazing series that he has backed on Shoah, the film Shoah, the 12-part series Shoah, and the Shoah Foundation, and so I think but I don't see that there's an agenda. I really don't see an agenda for almost anything in Hollywood now except making money. And I think that's the Hollywood agenda. And I think if there are Jewish films, as you say here, or films of interest to Jews, yeah. Not in the mainstream, but there would be. There absolutely would be if they found that there was a mass audience interest in it. In other words, if there's a niche or something like that, an independent kind of film, yeah, sure. There's a lot of that. But not in terms of the major studios and what they're producing now. It comes down to anything else. if you're going to produce these amazing stories about heroic Jews and everything else that's in the Jewish faith, if you can prove to them that it's going to make money, you'll see a lot of that. But you're not going to see it otherwise in Hollywood. Hollywood is very much a bottom-line driven industry.
And is Israel a particularly touchy subject to have films made about?
Well, I think it depends what aspect of Israel. I mean, look, Exodus is a very interesting example.
1962.
Yeah, no, actually, even 1960 was Exodus. Otto Preminger. It took Otto Preminger, who's hardly
50 years.
Yeah, and to see that film, but that film was not particularly successful financially.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it was a big, expensive, what they called at the time, roadshow, reserve seat film. And it played right down the street here at the Welsher Theater, which is now the Saban Theater, which is actually, was bought by Rabbi David Barron and his group, and Jewish services going there. And I remember as a kid in L.A. going by there, and Exodus was playing there for a long time. But Exodus was not necessarily a successful movie, despite having an all-star cast and everything. It was a long film, and it didn't play right into the Hollywood agenda at the time. And it wasn't quite the movie it should have been, perhaps, based on the book, which was phenomenal, Leon Aris's book, but the film version was a little staid and slow and didn't really grab the masses in the way it should have.
But even today, do you find that Jewish executives in the film business are pushing Jewish films?
Maybe in some instances. Look, I mean, there's always different eras in Hollywood where you're going to see that. I mean, I do remember Kirk Douglas and Cast a Giant Shadow.
What year was that?
That was 1965. I mean, you're pushing me back into the 60s to find the answers to your questions here. I don't see this happening now. I mean, the last one, as I said originally, was Steven Spielberg with Schindler's List.
That's over a decade old.
It's like 2 decades old. Next year it's celebrating its 20th anniversary of Schindler's List, and it's still the one movie we can point to that, is quite remarkable. Judgment at Nuremberg this year celebrated its 50th anniversary, 50 years ago. So maybe these films were more revolutionary years ago. Hollywood may have forgotten now. And now is a great time to remind Hollywood that there are many great stories and many great stories to do. They just have to dig it up and find it. But I find it, talking to filmmakers as I do all day long, that almost any movie is impossible to get made now. And it has to be the passion of the filmmakers. And what I can guarantee you is it takes a Spielberg, it takes somebody like that to push it through and to believe in it.
Right. Speaking of passions, what do you think of Mel Gibson's latest imbroglio with Joe Esterhaus?
Oh, that's interesting, yeah, because I only know it from the surface and from press reports basically on it. But Mel Gibson apparently enlisted him to write a screenplay of this, which is a very interesting story. And,
Are you familiar with it?
I was not familiar with it, but
The recent news.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that Mel Gibson says he wanted to make. Now, a lot of people think Mel Gibson wants to make it just to get his career back on track and to say, I'm not anti-Semitic and I'm not everything you've read. But he hires Joe Esterhaus, which quite frankly was a strange move to me because Joe Esterhaus hasn't been a hireable commodity in Hollywood for years. And, and he hired him to write this, and Joe Esterhaus has a lot of problems in the industry, so he's not necessarily the person. I don't know if that's the first screenwriter I would have hired in this case, but Mel Gibson did that. And, obviously he blew up on him and it was a big mess. And now the movie's not going to get made. I mean, Warner Brothers has dropped it like a hot potato. Maybe the interesting thing is maybe Warner Brothers as a studio was looking for an excuse to drop this project,
But was it, in your opinion, as a result of a poor quality script from Esterhaus?
I don't know, because I have to be honest with you. I haven't read the script. I don't know. No one's handed me the script to read. So I don't know. My guess is that the last few films that Joe Esterhaus wrote were not very good. And he may have, he may be a guy who had a very hot time in Hollywood at one time, but has lost his mojo. It may not have been a good script. This is what Mel Gibson says, that it wasn't a good script, that he had to beg him to turn it in and whatever. I don't know the truth.
Hammond wrote that the head of Mel Gibson's production company thought the script was great.
Yes, that's what Esterhaus says. And then you have the other